The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "You're fired! Hand over the keys!" The smile that spread across my face wasn't what Brandon Hutchins expected. The vice president of operations stood there, red-faced and trembling with authority he didn't actually possess, his perfectly manicured finger pointing at the door like some corporate deity casting judgment. What he didn't know, what his ego wouldn't let him comprehend, was that I wasn't his employee. I was the vendor. And my contract wasn't ending because he said so. It was ending because the clock on the wall read 11:47 a.m., and at precisely noon, our agreement would expire on its own terms. 13 minutes. That's all that stood between Brandon Hutchins and the complete collapse of a $12 million infrastructure system. 13 minutes before every automated process, in every integrated workflow, every critical operation running through Hartwell Industries ground to a catastrophic halt. And he had no idea. Before we dive into how one man's arrogance became a multi-million-dollar disaster, this channel shares real stories from the corporate battlefield. The moments when egos clash with reality and the results reshape entire companies. We recently hit our first milestone together, and now the journey toward 2,000 subscribers begins. Joining this community means getting front-row access to these untold stories. The subscribe button is right there when the time feels right. My name is Nira Castellanos, and at 34 years old, I ran the most successful enterprise software implementation firm that most people had never heard of. Castellanos Solutions wasn't a household name, and that's exactly how I preferred it. We didn't need flashy marketing or celebrity endorsements. Our work spoke for itself in the quiet language of uptime percentages, seamless integrations, and crisis-free launches. My father came to this country with $800 sewn into the lining of his jacket and a degree that nobody would recognize. He spent 15 years working double shifts at a packaging plant while my mother cleaned offices in the evenings. They didn't do this because they lacked ambition or intelligence. They did it because starting over required swallowing pride and rebuilding from ground zero. I grew up watching my father explain complex engineering concepts to me at our kitchen table, then watching him nod respectfully to supervisors, half as educated the next morning. That taught me something crucial. Humility isn't weakness. Understanding the person across from you, their pressures, their fears, their motivations, that's not sympathy. That's strategic intelligence. By the time I earned my computer science degree from Northwestern, I'd already been coding for 12 years. By 26, I'd built and sold my first automation platform. By 30, Castellanos Solutions had a client retention rate of 97% and a reputation for solving problems other firms wouldn't touch. We didn't just implement systems. We became temporary nervous systems for corporations in transition, keeping everything alive and functioning while they underwent fundamental changes. And then, when the time was right, we transferred that control back to them and walked away. That's what made us different. We always walked away. No long-term dependencies, no permanent contracts, no holding companies hostage. Clean integration, complete knowledge transfer, professional exit. Hartwell Industries had hired us 18 months ago for exactly that expertise. Hartwell Industries manufactured precision components for aerospace and medical device companies, the kind of operation where a single contaminated batch could mean lawsuits in the millions and reputation damage that never quite healed. When their legacy systems started failing, causing production delays and quality control nightmares, they'd brought us in to build something new. The project was massive. A fully integrated enterprise resource planning system connecting inventory management, production scheduling, quality assurance, supply chain logistics, and financial reporting into one seamless operation. Everything needed to talk to everything else in real time, with zero margin for error. I'd worked directly with their CEO, Jennifer Kowalski, and their CTO, Thomas Chen. Both were sharp, experienced and realistic about what the implementation would require. We'd structured an 18-month contract with clear milestones, complete documentation requirements, and a mandatory knowledge transfer period in the final quarter. The system we built was beautiful. Not in the way most people think of software. It wasn't flashy or trendy. It was beautiful the way a Swiss watch is beautiful, precise, reliable, with every component purposefully designed and tested beyond failure points. By month 15, everything was running perfectly. Production efficiency had increased by 32%. Quality control catches were up 47%. Inventory carrying costs had dropped by nearly $2 million annually. The system was exceeding every benchmark we'd promised. That's when Brandon Hutchins joined the company. He arrived as the new VP of Operations with an impressive resume from a Fortune 500 competitor, a designer wardrobe, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being seriously challenged. Jennifer had brought him in to scale the operations division as Hartwell prepared for aggressive expansion. His first week, he'd scheduled a meeting with every department head and key vendor. When my turn came, I'd walked him through the entire system architecture, showed him our knowledge transfer timeline, and explained that our contract would conclude in 90 days. We can renegotiate if Hartwell wants extended support, I'd offered, though the goal has always been complete internal ownership. Brandon had leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, wearing an expression I'd seen before, the look of someone mentally calculating how to take credit for other people's work. "I'll need to evaluate whether your services are still necessary," he'd said. "I have significant experience with enterprise systems. We might be able to accelerate this transition." Red flag, but not my first rodeo. "Of course," I'd replied smoothly. "Thomas Chen has all the technical documentation. Everything's on track for the handover." What I didn't say, the system's core integration protocols were custom-built, deeply complex, and required specific expertise to maintain. The knowledge transfer wasn't a formality, it was essential. And it took time. Over the next 2 months, Brandon systematically marginalized Thomas Chen. He brought in his own technical people, consultants he'd worked with at his previous company who spoke the right corporate buzzwords, but didn't understand Hartwell's actual systems. He started making decisions without consulting the people who'd built the infrastructure. Thomas called me after a particularly brutal meeting. "He's going to break something," Thomas said, exhaustion heavy in his voice. He overrode 3 quality control checkpoints because they were slowing production. "Naira, those checkpoints exist because medical-grade components require—" "I know," I'd interrupted gently. "Document everything. Every override. Every concern you raise, every response you get. CYA protocol. Cover your ass." Not the most elegant corporate strategy, but sometimes necessary. I'd also started my own documentation. Every interaction with Brandon went into detailed meeting notes that I sent to Jennifer and Thomas as follow-ups. Every change he requested, every concern I raised, every acknowledgement or dismissal, all in writing, time-stamped, saved. Because I'd seen this movie before. Guy comes in, wants to make his mark, sees an outside vendor as either an obstacle or an opportunity. Either he tries to extend the contract to claim he optimized vendor relationships, or he tries to end it early to claim he eliminated unnecessary costs. Brandon was clearly in the second camp. With 3 weeks left on our contract, he'd started copying me on emails to Jennifer suggesting that external dependencies were preventing his team from achieving operational autonomy. He'd praised my team's work while simultaneously implying we were somehow holding Hartwell back from even greater efficiency. Classic move. Create a narrative where getting rid of the vendor becomes a win, regardless of reality. I'd responded professionally, reiterating our contractual obligations and the agreed-upon transition timeline. Behind the scenes, I'd accelerated our documentation and moved our final knowledge transfer sessions to earlier dates when possible. Because here's what Brandon didn't understand. I didn't need to stay. My contract was ending anyway. I'd be paid either way. My professional reputation was built on successful transitions, not permanent dependencies. But the transition had to happen correctly. Hartwell's employees needed to understand the system's architecture, know how to maintain it, recognize warning signs, and have access to all the custom code and integration protocols we'd developed. Skip those steps, and the system wouldn't just fail. It would collapse in ways that would take months and millions to fix. The morning of my contract's final day started normally. I'd arrived at Hartwell's headquarters at 7:30, ready for our last scheduled knowledge transfer session with Thomas's team at 8. We'd be walking through the final pieces of the disaster recovery protocols and emergency override procedures. At 7:45, Thomas had appeared in the doorway of the conference room I'd been setting up, his face ashen. "Brandon fired me," he'd said quietly. "Security's packing my office now. He says the company's moving in a new technical direction, and my position is eliminated effective immediately." The coldness that had washed through me wasn't anger. It was recognition. This was worse than I'd anticipated. Brandon wasn't just posturing. He was systematically removing anyone who understood the system's complexity before they could complete the knowledge transfer. "Did he say anything about today's session?" I'd asked. "Cancelled. All remaining vendor transition meetings are cancelled. He said his technical team will interface directly with system documentation." Translation. He thought he could hand our manuals to his consultants and figure it out themselves. I'd pulled out my phone and called Jennifer's office. Her assistant informed me that Jennifer was traveling for a board meeting in Atlanta and wouldn't be available until the following week. Perfect timing for Brandon to make his move. I'd spent the next 3 hours trying to reach someone in authority. Jennifer wasn't responding to emails. The other C-suite executives deferred to Brandon on operational matters. The IT director who reported to Brandon wouldn't return my calls. By 11 o'clock, I'd accepted reality. This wasn't going to be resolved professionally. Brandon had decided to flex his authority, and nobody was in position to stop him. Fine. My contract ended at noon. I'd fulfilled every obligation we'd committed to. The knowledge transfer sessions had been scheduled. Brandon canceled them. The documentation was complete and available. The system was running perfectly. If Hartwell's new leadership decided they didn't need the final handover procedures, that was their choice to make. An expensive choice, probably, but theirs nonetheless. I'd started packing my laptop when Brandon had appeared. He'd brought an audience, 2 of his consultants and someone from HR who looked deeply uncomfortable. The power move was obvious. Witness his authority, make it memorable, establish dominance. "Naira," he'd said, not quite making eye contact. "I'm terminating your contract effective immediately. Your services are no longer required. I'll need you to hand over all access credentials, security badges, and company equipment before you leave the premises." The smile had appeared on my face before I'd consciously decided to smile. Not smugness, something closer to weary recognition. How many times had I seen variations of this scene? How many insecure executives had tried to rewrite professional relationships as power hierarchies they controlled? "Brandon," I'd replied calmly, "I'm not your employee. I'm a vendor. Our contract ends at noon today, approximately 13 minutes from now. You can't fire me any more than you can fire the company that supplies your office furniture." His face had flushed that particular shade of red that comes from public contradiction. "Don't play semantic games. You work for this company, which means you work for me. You're dismissed. Hand over the access credentials now." One of the consultants had shifted uncomfortably. The HR representative had been staring at her tablet, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. "I work for Castellanos Solutions," I'd corrected, keeping my voice level. "Hartwell Industries is our client. Our contract specifies transition procedures, final deliverables, and termination terms, all of which have been met. The agreement concludes at noon today, according to the schedule both parties signed 18 months ago." "I don't care what some contract says." "You should," I'd interrupted. Because at noon, our system access automatically terminates. Our monitoring services end. Our integration maintenance protocols cease. And all the automated processes we've been running in the background, the ones keeping your production scheduling synchronized with inventory management, your quality control systems talking to your manufacturing equipment, your supply chain integrated with your financial reporting, all of that stops. Brandon's expression had shifted from angry to dismissive. Our technical team can handle it. Your systems have been documented. They have been, I'd agreed. Thoroughly. And if your team had attended the knowledge transfer sessions we scheduled, they'd know how to access and implement that documentation. Thomas Chen could have walked them through it. But Thomas was terminated this morning, and you canceled today's final training session. We don't need training to read documentation. That's when I'd known. He genuinely didn't understand. Not the complexity, not the risk, not the consequences. In his mind, systems were simple. Turn them on. Follow the manual. Everything works. He'd probably managed teams that maintained commercial software platforms. Complicated, sure, but supported by vendors with help desks and troubleshooting guides. This wasn't that. This was custom-built architecture integrating 17 different operational systems, some new, some legacy, all running mission-critical processes for a precision manufacturing company. But explaining that would require him to admit ignorance, and his ego wouldn't allow it. The transition plan was designed to prevent problems, I'd said instead. If you'd like to extend our contract to complete that transition, well, I can draw up terms this afternoon. Otherwise, at noon, our contractual obligations end and you assume full ownership of the systems. We'll manage fine without you, Brandon had snapped. Hand over the credentials. I'd pulled out the envelope I'd prepared that morning. Every access code, every admin password, every security certificate properly documented and organized, exactly as the contract required. Everything's here, I'd said, placing it on the table. You'll also find the master documentation repository access in there. Your IT director has had those credentials for 3 months, but here's a second copy. Brandon had snatched the envelope without looking at it, handed it to one of his consultants, and turned back to me with cold satisfaction. You're done here. I'll escort yourself out or security will do it for you. I'd closed my laptop, picked up my bag, and checked my phone. 11:58 a.m. Best of luck, I'd said. And I'd meant it. Not sarcastically, genuinely. Because what was about to happen wasn't going to hurt Brandon, not really. People like him always landed on their feet, always found someone else to blame. The people it would hurt were the line workers whose production schedules would chaos into, the quality control specialists who'd lose visibility into contamination risks, the logistics coordinators who'd watch shipments miss deadlines, the customers waiting for precision components that wouldn't arrive. I'd walked out of Hartwell Industries at 11:59 a.m., badged out through security for the last time, and gotten into my car. At exactly noon, my phone had started buzzing. The first message was from the IT director. Production system throwing errors, need immediate assistance. Then another, from a manager I'd worked with in quality control. All our dashboards just went blank. What happened? Then 3 more in rapid succession from different departments, all variations of the same panic. I'd sat in my car, reading them, feeling that familiar knot of frustration and vindication that comes from being proven right in the worst possible way. My phone had rung. Brandon. I'd let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I'd answered this time. What did you do? He'd shouted without preamble. Everything's crashing. Fix it now. Brandon. My contract ended 7 minutes ago. I don't have access to your systems anymore, and I'm no longer authorized to work on them. You'll need to have your technical team address whatever issues they're experiencing. Don't give me that corporate bullshit. You sabotage something on your way out. I want you back here in 20 minutes or I'm calling our lawyers. The accusation should have made me angry, but I'd been in this industry too long. Fear makes people lash out. Incompetence makes them blame others. Brandon was experiencing both simultaneously. I didn't sabotage anything, I'd replied calmly. Our systems automatically disconnected at the contract termination time, exactly as specified in our agreement. The transition plan included procedures for maintaining those integrations with your internal resources, but those sessions were canceled. Your team has complete documentation and access to everything we built. The documentation doesn't tell us how to fix this. Documentation provides information. The knowledge transfer sessions provided understanding. You canceled the sessions. His breathing had been ragged on the other end of the line. Name your price. Get back here and fix this. And there it was, the moment every experienced vendor eventually faces. When the client realizes expertise isn't fungible, that you can't just swap one technical person for another like replacing batteries. I can have a new emergency contract drafted by end of business today, I'd said. Given the urgent nature and the need to rebuild work that should have been completed under the original agreement, the terms would be different from our previous arrangement. How different? Emergency response rate is triple our standard billing, minimum 4-week engagement, payment in full upfront. That's extortion. That's the market rate for immediate crisis response requiring specialized expertise. You're welcome to contact other firms. I can recommend several if that would help. The silence had stretched for a long moment. In the background, I'd heard shouting, alarms, chaos. How fast can you have that contract ready? He'd asked finally, his voice deflated. I'll have it to your legal department in 2 hours. But Brandon, I need to be clear. I'll work directly with Jennifer Kowalski and your IT director. This engagement requires cooperation and honest communication. If you're not prepared for that, we're wasting time. He'd agreed. What choice did he have? The damage assessment had been worse than I'd expected. When our integration protocols disconnected at noon, it hadn't just stopped new data from flowing, it had fragmented 17 different databases that were in the middle of operations. Production schedules were corrupted. Inventory counts were mismatched across systems. Quality control data was isolated from the manufacturing records it was supposed to validate. 3 production lines had been running aerospace components with contamination risks that normally would have triggered automatic shutdowns. Brandon's consultants had bypassed the safety interlocks entirely, not understanding they were seeing error messages because the monitoring systems had lost connectivity. Those components, worth approximately $800,000 in materials and labor, would need to be scrapped. You can't take chances with parts that go into aircraft. 2 medical device shipments had gone out that morning with incomplete quality documentation. Nothing dangerous, but the compliance violations would trigger FDA reviews and potential fines. And a major client, waiting for a rush order of precision surgical components, had been told their delivery would be delayed by minimum 2 weeks. They'd canceled the contract and placed the order with a competitor. That was $2.3 million gone. By the time Jennifer had returned from Atlanta the next morning, the preliminary damage estimate had been just over $12 million. Direct losses, wasted materials, canceled contracts, emergency consulting fees, and projected regulatory fines. She'd sat across from me in the conference room, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Our Thomas tried to warn me, she'd said quietly, about Brandon's style, about the risks of rushing the transition. I told him Brandon had the experience to make judgment calls. I should have listened. Brandon does have experience, I'd replied. Just not with systems like this. Commercial enterprise software and custom integration architecture aren't the same thing. It's an easy mistake to make if you haven't lived it. She'd managed a weak smile. You're being generous. I'm being realistic. This isn't personal. It's a failure of communication and understanding. Brandon saw complexity as a challenge to overcome through force of will. But some complexity is real and irreducible. You can't shortcut knowledge transfer any more than you can shortcut building a foundation. The emergency engagement had taken 6 weeks instead of 4. We'd not only had to restore the integration protocols, but audit every process that had run during the disconnection period, identify corrupted data, and rebuild safeguards that had been bypassed. I'd worked directly with Hartwell's IT team, the people who should have been ready to handle this from the beginning. They were talented and capable. They'd simply never been given the chance to learn the systems properly. Brandon had cut them out of the process, preferring his outside consultants who spoke his language but didn't know Hartwell's actual needs. With Thomas gone, Jennifer had promoted one of his senior engineers, Angela Rodriguez, to CTO. Angela was sharp, asked excellent questions, and understood the difference between looking competent and being competent. Brandon had resigned before Jennifer could fire him. The official story was that he'd decided to pursue other opportunities. The real story was that the board had made it clear his employment would end one way or another, and resignation looked better on his resume. His consultants had disappeared the day his resignation was announced. By the end of our emergency engagement, Hartwell's systems were not only stable, they were genuinely transitioned. Angela's team understood the architecture, could maintain the integrations, and had the knowledge to make informed modifications as the company grew. The final invoice had been significant. Triple rate for 6 weeks, plus materials and travel costs for my senior engineers. But compared to the $12 million in losses, it was a bargain. Jennifer had walked me out on my last day. A genuine last day this time. "I learned an expensive lesson," she'd said as we'd reached the lobby, "about due diligence, about trusting the people who've earned it, about the cost of ego." "You learned a lesson lots of executives never figure out," I'd replied. "That sustainable success requires humility, the willingness to listen to people who know things you don't. That's not weakness, it's wisdom." She'd shaken my hand firmly. "If we ever need your expertise again, I'll make sure the entire executive team understands what we're actually buying." Driving away from Hartwell Industries that final time, I'd thought about my father, about watching him defer to people less educated, less experienced, less intelligent, not because he had to, but because he'd understood something crucial. Just authority and expertise aren't the same thing. Position and knowledge aren't equivalent. The org chart shows who makes decisions, but it doesn't show who understands the consequences. Brandon had authority. He'd had every right to make the choices he made, but he'd lacked the expertise to understand what those choices would cost, and the humility to listen to people who did understand. That gap between authority and expertise, between position and knowledge, that's where most corporate disasters happen. Not from malice or stupidity, but from confidence untethered from competence. The vendor relationship had been clear from the beginning. We'd never promised to be indispensable. We'd promised to build something excellent and transfer the knowledge to maintain it. We'd fulfilled that promise. The fact that the client's new leadership had rejected the transfer didn't change the quality of our work, but it had changed the cost of their learning curve from $0 to $12 million. 3 months later, I'd been copied on an industry newsletter highlighting Hartwell Industries' successful technology transformation. Jennifer had been interviewed about their modernized systems and improved operational efficiency. She'd credited strong partnerships with expert vendors and the dedication of our internal technical team. No mention of Brandon, no reference to the crisis, just the success story, polished and professional. That's how corporate narratives work. The disasters get buried in quarterly reports as one-time expenses or transition costs. The heroes are whoever's still standing when the story gets told. I didn't need the credit. Castellano Solutions had a new client by then, a financial services firm with legacy systems held together by prayers and the institutional knowledge of 3 employees nearing retirement. Same pattern, different industry. Build something sustainable, transfer the knowledge, walk away clean. That's the work, not the dramatic confrontations or the million-dollar failures. Those are aberrations. The real work is the patient, detailed, undramatic process of building systems that outlast the people who create them. But every once in a while, someone like Brandon appears. Someone who mistakes authority for understanding, who sees expertise as a commodity, who believes confidence can substitute for knowledge. And when that happens, reality has a way of sending a very expensive invoice. If there's something to take from this story, it's not about vendor relationships or contract law or corporate politics. It's simpler than that. Expertise is earned through experience, mistakes, learning, and humility. It can't be purchased, delegated, or assumed. When you dismiss the people who've done the work because you're confident you can figure it out yourself, you're not demonstrating strength. You're volunteering for an expensive education. The systems that run our world, the infrastructure we rely on, the processes we take for granted, the technology that seems simple because it works, all of that represents countless hours of specialized knowledge, careful design, and hard-won understanding. When it works, it's invisible. When it breaks, it's expensive. And Brandon learned that lesson the hardest way possible, through public failure and professional consequences that would follow him regardless of how his resume explained away those months at Hartwell. But more importantly, Hartwell Industries learned it. Jennifer learned to value expertise over charisma, to trust the people doing the work over the people talking about the work. Angela and her team learned to document, communicate, and stand firm when they knew something was wrong. Those lessons stuck because they cost $12 million. The smile on my face when Brandon had tried to fire me wasn't about satisfaction or vindication. It was recognition. I'd seen this pattern before, knew how it would unfold, understood the costs that were coming. I hadn't wanted to be right. There's no joy in watching a company suffer because of one person's ego. The line workers who lost bonus potential because of production delays, the customers who switched to competitors, the employees who worked overtime fixing problems that shouldn't have existed. None of them deserved the consequences of Brandon's decisions. But I couldn't prevent him from making those choices. I could only fulfill my obligations, document everything, and be ready when reality sent its invoice. The keys he'd demanded? I'd never had keys to hand over. We'd used digital access credentials, SITs properly managed and automatically terminated. The firing he'd attempted? Impossible, because you can't fire a vendor any more than you can fire gravity. At noon that day, the contract ended exactly as scheduled. The system went dark exactly as it was designed to when our integration services disconnected. And the crisis that followed was exactly as predictable as anyone with technical expertise could have foreseen. 13 minutes. That's all the warning he'd had. 13 minutes between his moment of perceived triumph and the beginning of a $12 million lesson in the difference between authority and expertise. Some people learn humility from watching others. Some learn it from their own mistakes. And some learn it from the smoking crater where their confidence used to be. Brandon learned it the third way. This story represents the kind of real-world corporate drama that happens behind closed doors, in conference rooms and email threads, away from public view. The names and details may change, but the pattern repeats. Ego meets reality, authority meets expertise, and someone pays the price. These stories matter because they reveal the invisible infrastructure of professional life, the relationships, the contracts, the knowledge transfers that everyone takes for granted until something breaks. As this channel continues growing toward that 2,000 subscriber milestone, more of these stories will emerge from the corporate battlefield. The subscribe button remains available for anyone interested in the journey ahead. The professional world runs on expertise, maintained by people whose names nobody knows, doing work that stays invisible until someone decides it doesn't matter. Then everyone learns very quickly exactly how much it matters, and exactly how much it costs to learn that lesson the hard way.